All right, please introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Joe Pine. I like to consider myself Lori Stocky.
And you work for?
Strategic Horizons.
Okay.
I don't work for, I am. Strategic
Yes.
partner.
Right. Now, Joe, how long have you been an entrepreneur?
I left IBM almost 16 years ago. So ever since then, I've been on my own. Then I took on partners to create Strategic Horizons LLP, four-person partnership. I also have I've got what's called an US and S Corp, right, that owns the LLP. Another partner in another firm called Sterizon that does transformational consulting to turn companies into premier experience stagers. I'm starting to become a serial entrepreneur. I'm also working with folks in Kansas City and actually create and operating particular experiences, restaurants, cafes, and such experiences.
Okay. Now, when you left IBM and you decided, okay, I'm going to start my own business, what was the impetus for doing that?
The proximate impetus was they offered me 6 months salary to leave based on things that they were going through. And they wanted me to stay. They offered me this job over here, but I had this package that I could take, and I decided, particularly it was 6 months after my first book came out, Mass Customization, and I decided I'd like to try it out to see if I could make it on my own. You know, I figured if it didn't work, I can always go get another job somewhere. But let's see if I could make a living off of ideas, off of helping people think differently about how they view the world of business.
Okay, and how did you come up with the idea or the concept of experience economy?
Well, actually, it was about 6 months after I left IBM, where I was doing an executive education session back at IBM to IBM consultants. And I was talking about mass customization, the subject of my first book, about how you provide efficient, high volume, low cost operations in addition to individually customizing for each person. And I made the point that I often did that mass customizing the good actually turned into a service. That if you look at the classic economic distinctions between goods and services, goods are standardized, but services are customized. They're done just for an individual person. Goods are inventoried after production, but services are delivered on demand when the customer says, this is what I want. And goods are tangible and services intangible, but part and parcel of mass customization is the intangible service of helping customers figure out what it is that they want. So you customize a good, you're really in the service business. And this guy raises his hand from the back of the room. He was sort of a smart aleck. And he said, you talked about service companies that mass customize, so what does it turn a service into? And I shot back, mass customization automatically turns a service into an experience. And went, whoa, that sounds good. Hold on a second, I gotta write that down, I don't wanna forget that. And as I thought about it, I realized that it really was true, that customizing a service, creating a service that is so appropriate for a particular person, can't help but make them go wow and turn into a memorable event. And therefore into an experience, and therefore experiences were a distinct economic offering, as distinct from services as services were from goods, and therefore there would be an experience economy, just like there was a service economy that followed onto the industrial economy, that followed onto the agrarian economy. And so that was the start of realizing that there really was something there, that experiences were a distinct economic offering that we'd be shifting into an economy where they became the predominant economic offering into the experience economy.
Okay. And you teamed up with James Gilmore?
Yep.
And how did you know James?
Well, actually, right before I left IBM, he discovered my first book. He told me his reaction when we saw it in the bookstore was, oh shoot, somebody else has already written it, because he was thinking about that subject. So he contacted me. We had an opportunity to meet in Chicago, where we were both there at the same time. And then after I left IBM, I realized I need clients. I need people to pay me. So I called him up, and he became, after IBM, my biggest client. And so we became good friends, got to know each other, and at one point I shared these ideas about the experience economy with him. And as he got more and more tired of the big company environment, he had worked for Procter & Gamble, and then he worked for this small consulting company, but it got bought by CSC, multi-billion-dollar company, and he decided that that we worked well together. So we decided to go in together and create the partnership.
Okay.
And then which grew in the coming months and year into 4 people.
Okay, and
Ignore the man behind the curtain.
sorry, yes, this is a little bit of Wizard of Oz. going on back here. Now, as you have developed over the years, now, what would you say when you started your third book? It's the third book, right? Authenticity.
No.
How did you make that? Sorry?
Depending on how you count it, but yeah. I
Or
don't
a published
count
book,
that way.
official book?
Fully written book.
Fully written book. How did you make the switch from the experience economy to authenticity?
Well, Jim and I realized a couple of years after the experience economy came out, or in the ensuing years, that in the experience economy, when life becomes a paid for experience, that naturally people just question what is real and what is not. I mean, whenever experiences come to the fore, issues of authenticity follow closely behind. I mean, you can go back to Disneyland when it was founded on, if I remember right, July 17th, 1955. And ever since that point, it became a lightning rod for culture critics to talk about, well, what does this mean for us as a society, as a people, as a country, that we want to go to this ersatz place that doesn't really exist. And so it was viewed through this lens of authenticity. And we realized that in the experience economy, therefore, everything gets viewed through that same lens. And so authenticity is basically becoming the new consumer sensibility, the primary buying criterion by which people choose who to buy from and what to buy. And so increasingly, they don't want to buy the fake from the phony. They want the real from the genuine.
Okay, and how would you say that over time, as you are asked to speak in different countries and things, how would you say the development has been in the different countries as you approach them? I mean, who's kind of ahead of the game, who's behind the game, who needs to get in the game?
Well, I mean, the U.S. is probably ahead as the world's most developed economy, as one that rewards entrepreneurship greatly. There's an innovation greatly, that there's a lot of innovation that goes on there, and so there's a lot of activity, and a lot of that innovation is naturally going to be in experiences. But you see it in every developed country. It's not just a U.S. phenomenon. You see it around the world. Even completely undeveloped countries can innovate in experiences and use that as a way of developing without having to go through the normal path of agrarian, industrial, and service before getting to experience, through tourism. I mean, tourism is the #1 industry in the world. By some counts, it employs 10% of the world's population are directly or indirectly in the tourism business. And tourism business can be done in any country, even if there is no manufacturing base, even if there is no service base. You look at countries like Costa Rica, for example, that do not have that, but they're attracting people to come because if it doesn't have a manufacturing industrial base, it can be viewed as more authentic. You know, it's untamed wilderness. It is virgin territory in that way, and so it's a more authentic experience that people can have.
Now, in thinking of this Costa Rica and travel and things, I'm starting to think from a more sustainability perspective. Now, well, how does sustainability and the new green and the new eco-mindedness play into your current experience of experience economy, and how do you see it playing out in the future?
There's several factors. One is, for a lot of people, being eco-friendly is a key factor in authenticity. And sort of we talk in the book Authenticity about 5 different genres of authenticity. Go through all of them, but the first and the last one are natural and influential. And that's what being eco-friendly is about. It's about being influentially saving the environment and saving nature. And so it has a direct appeal for many people to authenticity, that if you aren't concerned with sustainability, then they're going to view you as phony. So therefore, there's a lot that companies have to do. On the long term, I don't know that it has any impact or any effect either way. Since we're here in Copenhagen, Denmark, I'm a Bjorn Lomborg-ite. I think he's right in terms of yes, the world may be warming, and yes, it may even be man-made cause, but it's not really all that bad a thing. And what the bad parts we can handle, and we've got a lot bigger problems than that. And it's not something that's going to ever be a catastrophe. But if people perceive it that way, then there are going to be business opportunities and market opportunities that they can take advantage of.
Okay.
And that are in fact good. I mean, it's not that the less waste we produce, yeah, that's better. The more sustainable we are, yeah, that's better. Even though I don't think it's a big effect, it's better.
Okay. Well, I guess the big effect question is big effect on what? On the economy? Big effect
Yeah.
on
And that's the problem, is that it can be a big effect on the economy. I mean, I think sustainability is good. I think it is better, but it's not better if we do it in ways that impair the economy. That if we, and there's so many people that are environmentalists that what they really are is anti-capitalist. And if you're anti-capitalist and what they're doing is they're latching onto this as a way of reducing development, not just slowing it down, but reducing development. And that will be worse for the world because it is development that creates the innovation that allows people to better their lives. And if we retard that and impair it and prevent it from happening, then we're going to be in a whole lot worse case. And again, that's what Lombard does with the groups that he gets together, with the Nobel Prize winners and that. He says, look at the issues we have. What are the biggest issues? And the environment never comes near the top. It's saving people from HIV. It is improving the lives of the poor. It's reducing the diseases around the world. Those are the issues that we need to have. And it takes development. It takes economic development to be able to have the wherewithal to do that. Mm-hmm. So as long as we're not impairing overall development, I've got no problem with stuff. But when it gets to that point, I'd say, no, this is wrong. This is bad. It's immoral.
Okay, wow. Now, but you
but I'm not passionate.
No, I can see that. But you don't see that now suddenly became an environmental discussion.
Right.
But the question being that all these things being equal, I mean, these are all key things that you're mentioning. But if we keep going, if the forecast is correct, I mean, if we're talking in 10 years, if we don't dramatically make a change and we don't have clean air to breathe and we don't have, I mean, and the polar bear, the species that are dying, that has to have an impact.
Is our air cleaner today than it was 150, 200 years ago in the height of the Industrial Revolution?
I don't know. It depends on what part of the world you're in.
No.
Okay.
Even
Tokyo?
No, not in Tokyo, yes, not in China.
Okay.
Right? Why? Because China is going through the Industrial Revolution now.
Right. Okay.
Right? It's the Industrial Revolution that created all the pollution. It's the development beyond that. It's a shift from goods to services to experiences.
Right.
It gives us, again, the wherewithal to clean up all of that stuff. And if we retard that, then we're going to be, particularly like in China's case, in India's case, as it continues to develop it, we are going to not create the wherewithal to make it. It's the developed world that can have clean air. It's the developing world that creates the pollution, including when we were developing in the 17 and 18 and 1900s.
Okay. All right. Well, now back to the entrepreneurial issue here. In terms of entrepreneurism, what do you find to be the most key traits of an entrepreneur? Key traits for success.
For success. Oh, that's different.
Yeah.
Innovative mind. To be able to think of something that hadn't been done before, a fearlessness to go out and actually fearlessness is not quite the right word. It's not a lack of fear. It's a willingness to overcome your fear and go out and do something different, do something that hasn't been done before. And then but you also need a business mind. There are so many creatives that do not have a business mind. Do not understand profit and loss, do not understand the concept of sunk costs, do not understand how to price, how to market things, even though they may have great ideas that would be successful. And that's where they either need to develop it or need to get help or they need to partner with somebody that does.
Okay. Now, in terms of budding entrepreneurs, if you're using the knowledge that you have and your expert background with experience economy and your business background, 2010, if you're going to start a business.
Next year.
Yeah, it is. That's the idea. I know you're not a forecaster.
People say 2010, like, whoa, wow.
You missed something. You've been here a long time. If people are thinking about creating businesses for 2010 and on, what would you suggest they should consider?
Well, first thing is I would primarily look at creating businesses, obviously in the experience business, is innovate in experiences. I told you this story before, but I was in Milan 8 or 9 years ago, and I was with the vice president of a big coffee company. And he said something that floored me, which is he said that there's been no innovation in the coffee industry in 15 years. And I said, have you never heard of Starbucks? Because for him, innovation was just in goods. He couldn't imagine experience innovation. And that's what Starbucks is. It's primarily an experience innovation. And it was Howard Schultz taking this concept from Milan, in fact, how ironic is that, back to the US and creating a new kind of business around it that now he is so successful he can export around the world. Other companies need to do that. They need to see what are entrepreneurs, what are innovations that we can create that are centered around different kinds of experiences that people want to have. There's no reason it couldn't have been a Milano coffee house that created that. Say we're going to export them, but they didn't have that entrepreneurial drive to do more than beyond the one shop generally that they have. It could have been an Illy, that now is getting into, now that Starbucks has created this coffee culture, not just in Italy, not just in Europe, but around in the U.S. particularly and around the world. Now other manufacturers are realizing, hey, we're missing out on this. Starbucks is controlling coffee consumption, not us.
Right.
So Illy is getting into coffee houses. Juan Valdez, they're now Juan Valdez cafes, right? The Colombian Coffee Growers Association, because they recognize people don't care about Colombia, they care about Starbucks. And so they're getting into the cafe business as well. What other businesses are there like that?
Now, in thinking about Howard Schultz and Starbucks, now there was some talk about there was some problems with Starbucks because they kind of had lost sight of themselves. Now,
Yep.
if that, to me, that plays very much to authenticity.
Absolutely.
Do you have any comments on that?
Well, ubiquity tends to be the death knell of authenticity. And that's the issue that Starbucks is getting into. That they've gotten so big that they're not rooted anywhere, and it's easy to lose sight of the heritage. They went with ideas towards efficiency, right? And efficiency may or may not coincide with a better experience. But with minds of efficiency, they stopped grinding the beans in the store. They stopped, in some cases, having even the smell of coffee in there. They created automatic espresso machines where, what do the baristas have to do? They press a button. Okay, well, that's like a manufacturing job. That's not an experience. Instead of them going through the process and tapping and dapping and doing this and pushing that, and where it becomes an act of theater, right? It's not an act of theater to press a button. And therefore they have lost it to some degree, and they need to bring that back to continue to be successful.
Now,
Just because you innovate a great experience, and even just because it's successful over time, does not give you. There's no divine right of entrepreneurship that says, or even divine right of experience staging that says you're going to always be successful.
That's right. Well, it's funny because as you're saying this, theater pops into my mind, and I think it's kind of, you can have a standing ovation one night and the next night, bomb, technically. So in thinking of this again, back to Starbucks, I saw the progression, how they brought the experience of coffee to the world. And then I also noticed that they went from serving the coffee and it being a part of the experience to suddenly they were more conscious of tapping into other authentic aspects, authentic aspects.
I've been living in a foreign country for too long.
Yeah, I think you're right. That they started considering about recycled paper cups and where did the beans come from? Where's the story in the beans? So,
Right.
how the part maybe, if I'm thinking of elements of using tools for using authenticity or creating authenticity, one tool, storytelling.
Yep.
One tool is you talk about with the real, the fake, the
Real, fake, real fake, fake real.
right, and genuine to I know okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. I know it. But the thinking about, do you have, could you think of maybe, 4 key things or 3 key things if you're saying you're going to create an authentic experience,
Yep.
to thine own self be true.
Right. Well, that's number 1. Right. To thine own self be true, which means you have to understand the self to which you must be true. Mm-hmm. And that's what's key, is understanding yourself, understanding your identity. Now, your identity is not what most branding consultants, or if you read a book about branding or marketing, tells you your identity is. When they use the term identity, they mean representation of identity. They mean your logo, your colors, and your catchphrases, your slogans, and so forth. No, identity is a self to which you must be true. Then that second thing, which centers around your heritage, how you were founded, your sense of purpose, your body of values, and so forth. other aspect of what they say identity is representation of identity, is what you say you are to others. And that's sort of the second key, is how do you represent yourself? And is there any mismatch between what you say about yourself, particularly in your advertising, but also in any communique that you have, in the places that you create, in the packaging and that? Is there any disconnect between what you say about yourself and what people actually experience when they buy you, when they encounter you? And if there is, then that's going to get you perceived as phony. So you need to be true to self, you need to be what you say you are to others. The third thing I would say, and then I'd encapsulate a bunch of stuff in there, is figure out the right ways to appeal to authenticity for you. I mentioned earlier, there are 5 genres of authenticity. I mentioned natural authenticity, where you appeal to things in and of the earth. Influential authenticity, when you appeal to things that make the world a better place or make us better in some way. In between, there's original authenticity, where you originate a new category. You do something that's never before seen by human eyes, and that's what a lot of entrepreneurship is about. And we were talking about your iPhone earlier, right? Apple appeals to original authenticity. If there's this design aesthetic to it that's never been done before, then there's exceptional authenticity, where something is done extraordinarily well, that's done with genuine human care. Where they do it better than you can do it yourself, which could be as simple as Southwest Airlines, where you actually let the stewardesses be themselves instead of mouth scripts, or flight attendants, or as high end as a Ritz-Carlton hotel, where they just do everything to make sure that you are treated as the exception that you are. And mass customization can be a way to exceptional authenticity. And then finally, there's referential authenticity, which is where you refer to some other context that tap into our shared memories, our longings that people then view as authentic. And I think of, it's what Disney World is doing, going back to the small town environment, whether that environment really exists or not, or even something like Venice. Venice is viewed as authentic because it referentially refers to the Venice of the past when it was a real city. Today it's a fake city. It exists solely for tourists. It's like Las Vegas. But at one time it was a real city, and they capture that, and that gets us to perceive it as authentic.
Okay. Now, in terms of entrepreneurial advice, do you have any? I mean, you just talked about from an authenticity perspective, but
Yeah.
authentic perspective. But going through this, now you've been an entrepreneur for
16 years.
16 years. Words to the wise, wisdom nuggets.
Boy, that's a good question. Other than outside of the ideas that I talk about, I would say that the thing that I did at the beginning, and I continue to do today, is I put a lot of pans in the fire. And I don't know which is going to cook something good, but I got enough pans in there that I know that something good's going to come out and I'm going to be able to eat. And that's what I always did. And so I actually, in the early days, I partnered with a number of different people and looked at partnering with different people and tried things out, and the partnership with Jim took, and that was the right one. But it was one of 8 or 10 pans in the fire at the time, and now continuing with the other companies that I'm working with. Some of those things are going to work, some of those things aren't going to work, but there's something there. So that what I would say is the key thing to my success is a lot of experimentation, a lot of trying stuff out, and keeping it work. So it's basically street theater.
Okay. And you were talking about the frying pans, and I was thinking about partnering. Do you have any? How do you choose a good partner? I mean, how do you know that it's a match?
Well, you don't know until you try and create something. Right, you try and create something together is the key thing. Whether it's a business opportunity, an actual business, a marketing endeavor, whatever it might be. But you gotta see if you're on the same wavelength, and it may not be the normal wavelength. In other words, people can be You have different ideas of what the business, you have different strengths. We mentioned earlier somebody who's a very creative person who may not have business sense. So partnering with somebody with business sense can be a good thing. So they may not. So making sure you're on the right wavelength does not necessarily mean you got the right set of skills. You got the same set of skills, the same set of capabilities. But in some way, you can come together.
Excuse me, sorry.
Mean that you have the same skills, the same capabilities, that you're basically the same person. That doesn't make any sense. But you've got compatible skills, and they can come together in a way that can create value overall.
Okay. Now, also starting off, economics. The economics. Now, did you start with a business plan?
No, I never did business plan. I'm sorry, is that not what you want to hear? I started, the closest we got actually was when we formed, personally I started with, I need clients. And my basic, if you call it a business plan, my basic thing was, I want to publish. I want to write books. I want to, and if I write books, and if I write in high places, if I write in Harvard Business Review, get articles published there, then people will call me. And so my entire career as an entrepreneur has been one of trying to get out of doing any marketing and get people to call me. And it's also, and that's where my first love is the figuring stuff out and developing frameworks and then writing it down so that people can see it too. And people, I often get called by people who says, okay, I've left my big company, how do I do this? And I said, well, I only know one way, and that's to write stuff that people want to read, and therefore they call you. And that's the best way to do it. Now, when I formed the partnership with Jim, we took his key marketer from his consulting company, Doug Parker, so he's one of our partners as well, and we called our business, a business plan would be obviously too big a phrase for it, but we said what we're about is two gurus and a marketer. Right? That's what we had. So we had one guy who was out there, he could answer the phone, he could do things, he could create things, and that would market us. But again, it's always been on the basis of people calling us. Not doing cold calling, not doing bingo cards or whatever. It's get people to call you. Get them to show their interest first, because they're already qualified. Okay,
well, if you are a struggling guru, how do you bring out your actually not struggling guru? How do you get yourself to be? When you started off, obviously you had some experience. You had had good business credentials from the beginning. So do you think that it was easier for you in terms of getting done what you needed, accomplishing your mission because you were well aligned?
Yeah.
Or, I guess the question is it tenacity? Is it positioning? Is it timing? Is it, what is it, do you think?
Yes.
Yes, and more yes.
Right. Well, one of the things I learned from my father early on is the answer to every question is it depends. Right. So I wouldn't view tenacity as not even necessarily a skill I have, but something that was important to me. Although I can see how that'd be important in many other businesses and many other entrepreneurial endeavors. I think skill was very important to me. That I had the skill of number one, pattern recognition to see what was going on. I had the skill to develop models. So pattern recognition, model making are the two key things, and then writing. Right, I was a decent writer from the beginning, and I think I'm much better now than I was then. But when I started, being able to do those were the key skills that I needed to be able to then project out into the world and get people to notice me. For others, it could be very different things. And if you're in a business that does need to market, if you're a business that does need to do personal selling, then being tenacious, I think, is a must.
Okay, and almost to finish it up here, I'm thinking in terms of when you got started, it wasn't so easy to publish. It wasn't so easy to market in the way that technology has made it for us.
Right.
How do you think technology plays to the entrepreneurial possibilities? And how should people be using them?
Yeah, I think it's so much easier. with that technology to be able to do it, because it's so much easier to reach people. You know, you can put up a website, and again, people will find you if you are doing something that they are interested in. You don't have to get it out there in a bookstore shelf anymore. You can write white papers, you can write just material, you can write blogs, and social networking is a key way to be able to interact. You can join groups and around it. You can make yourself useful to people in a way that gets them to notice you and say, hey, this is a person that has some skills and talents that I might be able to take advantage of.
Interesting that you said that. Do you find that being an entrepreneur is kind of like a calling and like a service? Service to others?
Right,
Yeah,
service
from,
as a calling, not a
yes.
service as an economic offering.
Right.
I think all businesses, actually. I think that while you can say in a narrow focus, the purpose of business is to make money, and from a I'm very much a staunch capitalist, right? I agree with that. But how do you make money? Well, you make money by creating more value for people than they consider their money to be, right? You create something that is worth more to them than the amount of money that you are charging for it. And therefore you are enhancing their lives. You are creating something of value, and that is there at least can be a calling, even if it's something mundane, even if it's something that we don't consider making the world a better place. It makes this person's life better because they've chosen it over the other possible uses they had for that money, or they chose it over keeping it in their bank account or saving it for a rainy day.
Okay, and now the final question. It's a big one. If you're creating an environment for entrepreneurial growth, I'm talking, the elements of creating a good atmosphere for entrepreneurial growth, what are the key factors for making that happen?
Not from an individual entrepreneur standpoint, but from an overall standpoint. The number one thing, and this relates to what governments should be doing, is governments need to stop protecting old ways of doing business. Because by letting Joseph Schumpeter's waves of creative destruction happen is how you create entrepreneurs, how you create opportunities. And if you retard that by protecting old industries like farming, which most every company protects in some way, or protecting particular favored jobs, like in the automobile industry and other things that is going on now, you retard entrepreneurship, you retard the creation of economic value, you reduce the growth in your company, you make your country poorer, you make your people poorer as a result. Even though through the protection, you can point to particular people that were saved, and you can't point to the innovations that were created. You can't point to the economic value that would have been created. It's an axiomatic law of economics that is the case. So that's the number one thing, is to have a free-flowing economy. One of the reasons the United States is so entrepreneurial relative to other countries is because our labor market is so free-flowing. And you can easily, not as easy as it should be, but you can easily fire people. You can easily quit your job. You can easily start a company. You can, there's just so many ways that all that is easy. You can easily find networks that will help you and provide things that you can't do. I mean, there are companies that you can outsource any piece of your business to, and then basically your entire business. You can do that in the U.S. Because of the free-flowing nature of it, and more economies need to be like that. They tend to get so ossified that you get that grinding that means that things don't work well, and therefore you can't create newness, you can't innovate, you can't create economic value.
Okay, well, that was my last question. Do you have anything you would like to part with?
No.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, Joe.
All right.
Okay, bye.